So I'm Michael Bourne, and I have been teaching at BCIT on and off since 2016. And I teach in the Liberal Studies Department, and I mostly teach writing courses. My most recent publication is my novel, Blithedale Canyon, published by Regal House Publishing in the U.S. And it's a debut novel set in my hometown of Mill Valley, California. And it's a story about a guy who's in his 20s, and he is an addict. He's made a lot of bad choices in his life, and he's getting out of jail. And part of his the conditions of his probation is that he's got to live with his mom and his mom's second husband, who he hates, in his hometown, which he also hates. And the book begins. He's working at the only job he can get because of his criminal record at a fast food burger joint. One day he's behind the counter, working the register, and he looks up and he sees a girl he used to know in high school, a mother of two, and he was half in love with her. So it's a story of addiction, but it's also it's a love story for first and foremost. Well, in the case of Blithedale Canyon, they say, the old line is write what you know. So I figured I know a lot about my hometown. This is a debut novel, right? It's my first novel. So I know a lot about my hometown, and I know a lot more than I'd like to know about addiction. I had this notion of myself writing for like every woman who's ever dated that guy in their 20s who they tried to fix and it just it was terrible. I wanted to give those women and other people in these people's lives a sense of what was actually going on in that guy's head during all that. That was my perfect audience. Was writing for people who love an addict or are the brother of one or the mother of one or whatever it is, what's going on in that person's head. That was really what I was trying to do. I've published a ton of short stories in literary magazines, and before that, my job before I was a teacher, before I went back to graduate school, I was a newspaper reporter in small towns in California and Colorado. And so I stopped doing that when I went to grad school. And then about 10, 15 years ago, I started doing it again. So the book is a first novel, but I've also published a ton of journalism. I have ongoing relationships with magazines. I published in the New York Times, The Economist, the Globe and Mail, so that's kind of, I've done book reviews, I've done, you name it, I've done it. So that's another side of my writing life is, and it's one that pays a lot better, I have to say. I'm a classic night owl, and mornings are not kind to me. I don't do mornings. So I have for years now, had a process where the mornings are for work, right? Grading papers, transcribing tape, for interviews, all kinds of work that requires some brain, but not full concentration. And then I have some lunch, and in the afternoon, sort of from 2 to 6, and obviously I can't do this every single day because life intrudes, but whenever I can, from 2 to 6, those are my golden hours. That's when my brain is most there. And so I have, as long as I can, I have a program that shuts down my email and distractions. I don't answer the phone. And from 2 to 6, I really try to make that be my work time, and then life intrudes again. But that's really been my process for years. Is that's when I'm most there, and I really try to make the most of that time. And then you have life. It's not just work too. I raise a child. You do what you do. And writing and the teaching I do at BCIT, those are really different muscles. The kind of, but the journalism definitely influences it. The way I teach, right down to how I teach writing sentences, and the kinds of things that I privilege. I have a real journalist mindset. From like the way I teach sentences is much heavier on concrete subjects and active verbs, which is really a journalism thing, right? You start off with something really concrete, a person, a thing you can touch, and then an active verb. And I'm very, very, that comes out of my journalism training. And I think it's actually a really useful thing in professional writing. The kind of writing my students are going to be doing is to be able to write that way. And then also I'm really, I'm much more convinced, and I teach people to be convinced by observable facts rather than theories. And again, I think that comes out of being a journalist and working in the real world. That I spent my life trying to figure out, I spent my journalism life trying to figure out what people were doing. And applying theories didn't work. You had to figure out, like, what are they actually doing? And I try to communicate that a lot to my students. So what's actually going on in this story? What's going on? How does that work? So I definitely think that the journalism training shows up a lot in my teaching. Well, I'm continuing the journalism thing, but the next book, which I've actually now finished, and I'm looking for a publisher, is very different. The new book is, like I said, I was a journalist. I was a reporter, and one of my jobs was working in a ski town in Colorado. And so, write what you know. So I set a book in a ski town in Colorado, except that in this ski town, there is there's a group of eco-terrorists who are doing a series of bombings to stop a major new resort in a wilderness area. And the book is kind of a detective novel, except that the detectives in this case are the reporters at a small town newspaper. They're the ones who are going to be eventually solving the crime, figuring out why these people are doing this, who they are, and why they're doing it. So I wanted to kind of tell I really love detective stories, crime novels and things like that. I just eat those things up. And I sort of wanted to do that, but I don't really know that much about police work. I do know a lot about how journalists work. So I kind of wanted to take that and run with it. It's been a lot of fun. I think it's a good book.